AITA for taking back the software I built after my dad fired me for his girlfriend? I am Mason Reed. I am 31 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I was the Chief Operating Officer and the only information technology systems administrator of my family's manufacturing business, Reed Industrial Supply. We manufacture fasteners and specialized hardware components for the aerospace and automotive industries. It is not a glamorous sector, but it is extremely profitable when you have the right contracts and guarantee consistent quality. My father, Victor Reed, founded the company in 1994 when I was a baby. For the first 15 years, it was a small operation run out of a warehouse in Ohio. Nothing fancy, a few employees, basic equipment, handwritten invoices, and a lot of effort. My mother kept the books while my father got clients and managed production. It was the typical small business where both worked 60-hour weeks just to keep it afloat. I literally grew up in that warehouse. My mother used to set up a playpen in a corner of the office to keep an eye on me while she processed orders. Some of my first memories are the smell of machine oil and the constant sound of the equipment running. When I learned to walk, I roamed the production floor watching the machinists. They gave me scrap material to play with, little pieces of metal and screws that I organized into patterns on the floor. As I grew older, I spent my summers sweeping floors, sorting inventory, and eventually learning to operate the machines myself. By the time I was 16, I could run the computer-controlled industrial machines better than most full-time employees. My father used to brag about me to his friends at industry events. "That is my son," he would say, patting me on the shoulder. "Someday he will take over all of this. It will be the 4th generation if we count my grandfather's machine shop." Back then, those words meant everything to me. I truly believed I was being groomed to inherit the family legacy. That is why, when I went to college, I did not just pick any major out of personal interest. I chose to study computer science with a minor in business administration because I understood where the industry was heading. Factories would no longer rely solely on machines and manual labor, but on automated systems, programs that control production, and data that allows for real-time decision-making. Everything was going digital. They call it Industry 4.0, and I wanted to be ready for that change. I wanted to bring Reed Industrial into the modern era. I wanted to prove to my father that his faith in me was justified, and that was exactly what I did. After graduating in 2015, I went back to work full-time at the family business. By then, the company had grown to about 30 employees and generated decent revenue, but its infrastructure was an absolute disaster. My mother had passed away 2 years earlier from cancer, and without her organizational skills, the administrative side had fallen apart. No one had realized how much she held the operation together until she was gone, and it showed in everything. They were still using paper files. Scheduling was done on a whiteboard that was erased and rewritten so many times it was barely legible. Payroll was calculated manually with chaotic spreadsheets. I found accounting errors dating back 3 years. Clients received incorrect invoices, orders got lost. It was complete chaos. I spent the first 2 years rebuilding everything from scratch. I did not just buy standard software and adapt to it. I designed a completely customized enterprise system, tailored to the way our factory actually worked. It was a system that connected all areas of the company. It could track every component in the warehouse down to its lot number. It organized production, optimizing machine usage, and automatically adjusting for maintenance. It logged every quality control check and detected potential problems before they became failures. It also centralized customer relations, saved order history, communications, and complaints, automatically generated invoices with actual production data, calculated payroll integrating hours worked and benefits, and displayed real-time reports so management could see what was happening in the company at any given moment. It was not quick. It took me about 4 years to develop it line by line until it exceeded 200,000 lines of code. I started while I was still in college and finished it after joining the company full-time. I integrated it with our machinery so production data was recorded in real time in the database. I also created direct connections to our clients' purchasing systems, allowing orders to be processed seamlessly, and I set up automatic alerts for maintenance, inventory restocking, and delivery deadlines. The system was called Reed Core. My father thought it was a nice name when I presented it to him. He had no idea what he was looking at. To him, it was just computer stuff that made the screen show numbers. He did not understand that I had built the entire nervous system of his company. In the 3 years since implementing Read Core, our efficiency improved by 40%. We reduced labor costs through better scheduling and eliminated order errors through automated verification. We were able to double the number of clients without hiring more administrative staff because the system handled most of the paperwork. The company's revenue went from $3 million a year to over $11 million. Suddenly, my father was playing golf with CEOs and getting invited to industry conferences as a visionary entrepreneur who had transformed his traditional manufacturing business into a model of modern efficiency. I never got credit for anything, at least not publicly. In private, my father would sometimes pat me on the back and say, "Good job, son." But in interviews and conferences, he talked about implementing cutting-edge technology and strategic modernization, as if he had personally designed the systems, as if he knew what a database schema was or could explain how programs connect to exchange information. I told myself it did not matter. The company was doing well, I had a decent salary, and eventually it would all be mine anyway. That is the theory behind a family business, right? Building something together for the future. Sacrificing individual recognition for collective success. How naive I was. Things started to change about 2 years after my mother passed away. He would come home smelling of perfume, and it was definitely not a fragrance my mother would have worn. He started caring more about his appearance. He joined a gym. He started dressing better. Pretty clear signs. I am not stupid. I knew what was going on, but I kept my mouth shut. Confronting my father had never ended well for me. He was not one for deep conversations and had a quick temper. Growing up, I learned quickly that questioning his decisions only led to lectures about respect and knowing my place. Besides, I thought his personal life was his business. My mother was gone. He had the right to move on. I did not expect him to spend the rest of his life alone. Then I met her. Her name was Vanessa Lang, 34 years old. Blonde, former pharmaceutical sales representative. My father introduced her as his executive assistant at a company dinner about 18 months ago. She showed up in a dress that cost more than most of our floor workers make in a week, hanging onto my father's arm as if she were surgically attached to him. I knew immediately what she was, the way she looked at the company, the building, the equipment. She did not see a business. She did not see the years of work and effort that had built something from the ground up. She saw assets. You could almost see dollar signs reflecting in her pupils. During dinner, she asked my father questions about revenue, profit margins, and growth projections. They were not the questions of someone genuinely interested in the business, but of someone calculating her potential cut. But what really bothered me was how quickly she inserted herself into the operations. Within 2 months of being hired as an assistant, she was already attending management meetings. In 4 months, she had an office next to my father's, a corner office that used to belong to our vice president of operations before he retired. She redecorated it with expensive furniture and artwork that had nothing to do with manufacturing. In 6 months, she was already making decisions about supplier contracts and employee schedules without consulting anyone. She let go of 2 longtime employees because, according to some numbers she did not even understand well, they were underperforming. She also switched our main supplier to another company that offered her personal incentives. Later, the purchasing manager confirmed to me that the new supplier's prices were actually higher, but Vanessa had ignored his objections. I only brought the issue up with my father once. We were in his office, and I tried to raise it as tactfully as possible. I said something like, "Hey, I am not sure Vanessa has the right background to make purchasing decisions. Maybe we should involve someone from operations before approving these supplier changes, just to make sure we are getting the best value." My father looked at me as if I had just insulted his mother. His face turned red and his jaw tightened just like it always did before he started raising his voice. "Vanessa has a business degree and 15 years of corporate experience," he said in a sharp voice. "She knows what she is doing. Maybe you should focus on your computer stuff and let the adults run the business." The adults. He said that to his 31-year-old son, the same one who had built the systems that made his company run. To the person who had sacrificed his entire youth to turn a struggling business into a profitable company. I let it go because what else could I do? Make a scene, threaten to quit. He was my father. I believed we were building something together. I believed blood meant something. Over the following year, Vanessa systematically positioned herself as indispensable. She started handling communication with our most important clients, meddling in relationships I had cultivated for years. She took control of the finances, replaced our accountant with someone she trusted, and restricted access to the company's books. She involved herself in every major decision while simultaneously isolating me from the process. Meetings I used to attend became executive level only. The information I needed to do my job suddenly became on a need-to-know basis. Projects I had led were reassigned to consultants Vanessa brought in from her network. And throughout all that time, my father simply smiled and nodded. He was completely blind to what was happening, or maybe he just did not care. He had an attractive woman telling him every day how brilliant and successful he was. What could compete with that? His son, the typical tech professional, should have seen it coming. All the signs were there, if I had wanted to look at them honestly, but I guess I was still clinging to a naive hope that blood meant something, that the years I had invested in building the company meant something, that my father actually cared about me beyond what I could provide for him. The first real warning sign came about 3 months ago. Vanessa hired a new information technology consultant without telling me. He just showed up one Monday, a guy named Justin, following her closely while asking questions about our network infrastructure. 20-something, well-dressed, with that corporate office style. The typical guy who uses words like synergy with complete seriousness and thinks knowing how to use spreadsheets makes him a tech expert. When I asked what was going on, Vanessa smiled with that fake smile she always used and said she was exploring options to optimize the system. I explained, with all the patience I could muster, that I had personally designed and maintained our entire technological infrastructure. I knew every line of code, every server configuration, and every security protocol. Justin could not optimize anything without my involvement, because I was the only person who understood how everything worked together. Vanessa smiled at me the way one smiles at a child who has just said something naive. That is exactly why we need to have backup, Mason. What if something happens to you? The company cannot depend on a single person. It is basic risk management. I wanted to say many things to her. That maybe the company should not have allowed a single person to build everything without documentation or anyone who could replace him. That maybe if they had invested in a real tech team instead of dumping everything on me while they took the credit, we would not be in that situation. That if my father had listened to the 3 proposals I made over the years to hire more technical staff, we would already have that backup she was now so worried about. But I did not say any of that. I just nodded and told Justin I would be happy to guide him through the systems when he was ready. Over the next few weeks, Justin asked a lot of questions. He wanted network maps, system documentation, and login credentials for various platforms. I gave him the basics, surface-level information anyone could figure out with a little research: server names, IP addresses, general architecture diagrams, access to non-critical systems. But when he started asking specifically about read core, the source code, the encryption keys, the actual inner workings of the core systems, I became extremely careful. Here is the important detail about read core. I built it in my spare time on my own equipment before implementing it at the company. I wrote the original code in my apartment over 3 years while I was still in college. And when I brought it to Read Industrial, I never signed over the intellectual property rights. There was no work-for-hire agreement or assignment clauses in my employment contract. In fact, I tried to do things the right way. A year after implementing it, when the value of the system became clear, I proposed to my father that we formalize the agreement, license the software to the company for a nominal fee, and get everything legally documented to avoid any doubts about ownership. My father dismissed it immediately. "We do not need lawyers in a family business," he said. "You are my son. This is your company too. No paperwork is needed." I remembered that conversation very well because it now took on a crucial meaning. Even though the company used Read Core, I was still its owner. The source code, the architecture, the encryption protocols, everything belonged to me. And without the encryption keys that only I had, no one could access the core systems. Not Justin with his consultant credentials, not Vanessa from her corner office, not my father, despite being the owner of the company. So when Justin asked for full administrative access for auditing purposes, I told him I would need my father's direct written approval. He seemed annoyed, but did not push it. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 3 weeks ago, my father called me into his office for what he described as an important meeting about the future of the company. Vanessa was already there when I arrived, sitting in one of the leather chairs, as if she owned the place, something she was about to confirm. My father was behind his desk, visibly uncomfortable. He could not look me in the eye. That should have been my first sign. He never got uncomfortable about anything. He was the kind of man who moved forward with the confidence of a charging bull. He got straight to the point. He handed me a folder with official documents and said, "Mason, we are making some structural changes in the company. We are eliminating the chief operating officer position and consolidating the functions into a new chief administrative officer role. Vanessa will be taking over those responsibilities." I stared at him. At first, the words made no sense. It was as if he were speaking in another language. "Are you letting me go?" I finally asked. "We are restructuring," he replied, still not looking me in the eye. "Your position is being eliminated. It is not personal. It is not personal." I had dedicated 8 years of my life to that company. I had built the systems that made it run. I had worked 60-hour weeks for a salary that was half of what I could have made in the private sector because I believed in the family legacy, because I trusted him, and he was telling me it was not personal. "What about ReadCore?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Who is going to manage the systems?" Vanessa spoke up. She had been watching me with a smug smile, clearly enjoying the moment. "Justin has been hired full-time as our new Chief Technology Officer. From now on, he will handle all technology operations." I almost laughed. Justin had only been at the company for a few weeks. He had barely scratched the surface of how our systems worked. He could no more maintain ReadCore than he could perform brain surgery. He was the kind of person who thought structured query language, the language used to manage databases, was just a fancy acronym. "Justin does not know the systems," I said. "He does not have the access credentials. He does not have the encryption keys. None of this is documented because I was never asked to document it. No one bothered to understand what I actually do." My father shrugged. "Then you will do a full handover before you leave. Passwords, documentation, everything. Human resources will schedule your exit interview for Friday." I really looked at him. This man who had raised me, who had promised me that someday the company would be mine, who had taken everything I built, was now handing it over to his girlfriend as if I were nothing. As if all those years meant nothing. As if I meant nothing. "And if I do not do the handover?" I asked quietly. Then he said the words I will never forget. He leaned forward, finally looked me in the eyes and said, "You built the system, but I own it. This company, this building, these employees, everything is mine. You can cooperate and leave with a decent severance package, or you can cross me and walk away with nothing. It is your choice." He said it as if he were explaining something obvious, as if I were too slow to understand it, as if he were doing me a favor by giving me options. I stayed silent for a long moment, then I nodded. "All right," I said. "I will need a few days to prepare the documentation." My father smiled as if he had won. Vanessa was already typing on her phone, probably showing off her new title on social media. Neither of them noticed that I was not angry. I was not upset. I felt absolutely nothing. I was already calculating. The next 3 days were interesting. I showed up to work as usual. I was polite to everyone. I smiled at Vanessa in the hallway. I talked to my father about the weather as if nothing had happened. I told Justin I would prepare all the documentation for the transition and asked him to make a list of everything he needed to know. He handed me about 40 questions: network topology, software licenses, backup procedures, vendor contacts, basic stuff. I answered each one in detailed, professional, comprehensive documents, exactly what would be expected from a responsible employee during a transition. I even prepared training materials, walked Justin through the most superficial interfaces, taught him how to generate reports, and check the system status. I answered all his questions accurately. What I did not give him was anything related to ReadCore. Justin assumed ReadCore was just another enterprise software, something that could be understood by exploring the interface or looking for documentation online. He did not understand that I had built it from scratch, that its entire architecture was proprietary, that without the encryption keys and administrator credentials, the system was essentially a black box. The servers kept running. The software appeared to operate normally, the screen displayed data, and the buttons responded. But all the truly important functions were protected by several layers of security that only I had access to. Inside there was everything. The system that processed payments and moved money between accounts. The customer database with 15 years of history and contract details, the programs that organized production on the factory floor, and the connections that linked our system to customer orders. Everything was encrypted, and without the keys, which only existed in my head and on secure hard drives I kept at home years ago as a backup, it was impossible to access any of it. On my last day, I walked through the building one more time. I said goodbye to the employees I had worked with for years. Good people who had no idea what was about to happen. Janet, the floor supervisor who had been at the company longer than I had been alive. Or the accounts receivable lady who always brought donuts on Fridays. Sharon from Human Resources, who helped me navigate the bureaucracy when I first started. I felt a bit sorry for them. Honestly, they had done nothing wrong. They were just caught in the middle of something they did not understand. In my exit interview, Human Resources handed me a severance package and had me sign several standard confidentiality agreements. I signed everything without arguing. None of those documents mentioned intellectual property or software rights, because my father was too cheap to have a lawyer review the contracts. They were typical clauses: do not defame the company and keep trade secrets confidential. Reed Core was not a trade secret, it was my property. As I was walking out the front door, Vanessa intercepted me in the parking lot. She wore that self-satisfied expression, as if she had just pulled off a major business move. Her heels clicked on the asphalt as she approached. "No hard feelings, right, Mason?" she said. "This is just business. Your father and I are building something special here, and we need people aligned with our vision." I looked at her for a moment. This woman who had worked her way into my family and convinced my father to let go of his own son. Then I smiled. "No hard feelings, Vanessa. I hope everything turns out exactly as you deserve." She did not catch the hint. She just smiled back and walked away, her expensive heels clicking on the pavement. I got into my car and drove home. I turned off my phone and slept better than I had in months. The first call came on Monday morning. I was making breakfast when I saw Janet's name on the screen. She sounded almost panicked. "Mason, I know you do not work here anymore, but something is wrong with the system. No production schedules are loading. The machines will not start their automatic sequences. Justin has been trying to fix it all morning, but he cannot access anything." I told her I was sorry, but that I no longer worked at Reed Industrial, and that she should contact the new chief technology officer. I wished her luck and hung up. The second call came an hour later, from accounts receivable. The billing system was frozen. They had 36 invoices ready to go out that day for completed orders, and they could not access a single one. The customer database threw errors every time someone tried to look up an account. I gave her the same answer. It was no longer my problem. The calls continued all day. Manufacturing coordination was down. The quality control system was inaccessible. Inventory showed blank screens where thousands of items should appear. The automated ordering system had stopped processing requests. One by one, every department that relied on Reed Core discovered that the system no longer worked. But that was not exactly it. Reed Core had not stopped working. It had simply stopped allowing access. The authentication protocols I designed detected that the administrator credentials were not being validated according to the established cycle. In other words, the system expected an authorized administrator to periodically confirm that everything was in order. Since that did not happen, after 72 hours without that verification, the system automatically locked down and encrypted all operational data as a security measure. It was designed to protect against intrusions like hackers or data theft attempts where someone breaks into the system to lock the data and demand a ransom. If the system detected anything abnormal, the lockdown prevented access to the real data. I had built that feature years ago. My father had no idea it existed because he never cared to understand how any of this worked. He only knew that the screen showed numbers and that the business made money. Now the screen showed nothing and the business was grinding to a halt. By Tuesday, I had already received calls from 6 different people at the company. By Wednesday, the calls stopped coming from individual employees and started coming directly from my father. I let them all go to voicemail. He left 7 messages that day, each more frantic than the last. The first few tried to sound friendly, almost casual. "Hi, son. Just wanted to see how you were doing. Justin is having some technical difficulties. Could you give us a call when you have a moment? We might need your expertise on this." By the third message, the facade was starting to crack. "Mason, I need you to call me back. The system issue is more serious than we thought. We are willing to pay you consulting fees if necessary. By the fifth message, there was no trace of friendliness left. Mason, I need those passwords. Whatever point you were trying to make, you have made it. Call me back immediately. And in the seventh, he jumped straight to threats. His voice was shaking. I could not tell if from rage or fear. I do not know what game you are playing, but this is corporate sabotage. I will have you arrested. I will destroy you. Call me now. I saved all the messages. Documentation matters, something my father never understood. On Thursday, finally, I received a call from an unknown number. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. It was Vanessa. She must have been using someone else's phone, knowing I was not answering calls from the company. Mason, we need to talk. There has been a misunderstanding. There is no misunderstanding, I replied calmly. You eliminated my position and I left. That is not what we wanted. We need access to the systems, she said, her voice tight, barely containing her panic. Justin cannot get anything to work. Payroll is due tomorrow and the payment system is locked. 65 people are waiting for their paychecks. That sounds like a problem for your new chief technology officer, I replied. Mason, be reasonable. People need to get paid. Whatever problem you have with me or your father, there are innocent people relying on that money. Then maybe you should have thought about that before letting go of the only person who knew how the systems worked, or before assuming you could just take what I built without consequences. There was a long silence. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. There was no trace of sweetness left. The mask had completely fallen. Your father is going to sue you into bankruptcy. You will never work in this industry again. I will make sure of that, she told me, raising her voice. I am looking forward to explaining to the judge that I own the intellectual property of Reed Core and that I never signed any agreement signing over those rights to the company. It will also be interesting to mention that your own father verbally confirmed that arrangement when he said we did not need lawyers in a family business. I am sure the judge will find that relevant. After saying that, I hung up. Friday was payday, or at least it was supposed to be. From what I heard later, about 65 employees went to work expecting their direct deposits to reflect in their accounts at midnight on Thursday. When the money did not show up, calls started flooding into human resources first thing Friday morning. Sharon, the human resources manager, tried to process payroll manually, but she could not access the banking integration or the salary records. Everything was locked inside Reed Core. She could not even see how much each employee was owed because the compensation data was encrypted along with everything else. By noon, employees started leaving. Some were furious, yelling at managers who had no answers. Others were scared, worried about rent, bills, pending payments. A few of the most senior employees called me directly, not to complain, but to understand what was going on, to see if it was all a mistake. I explained that I had been let go and that the company had not made sure someone else knew how to run the systems before letting go of the only person who understood them. I told them I was sorry and also recommended that they file wage claims with the Department of Labor if they did not receive their pay within the legal time frame. In less than a week, Reed Industrial began to fall apart. 8 employees filed formal wage complaints. 2 employees quit on the spot and found work elsewhere. The rest of the staff was left demoralized and distrustful, but the internal problems were nothing compared to the ones that started popping up with clients. 2 of the company's biggest clients suspended their contracts because their orders were not being processed. They needed parts to keep their own production lines running, and the company could not deliver. An aerospace company that accounted for almost 30% of the company's revenue sent a formal letter threatening to terminate the relationship entirely if the delivery issues were not resolved within 10 business days. My father tried to hire external tech specialists to force access into the system. Over the course of a week, he brought in 3 different firms. They all told him the same thing. Without the encryption keys, they would have to rebuild everything from scratch. The estimated time frame was 4 to 6 months minimum, and the initial cost exceeded $200,000 just for the assessment and basic reconstruction. Meanwhile, I had already been contacted by 2 competitors who heard through industry contacts that Reed Industrial was facing serious operational issues. They wanted to know if I would be interested in joining their companies. One of them offered me almost double the salary my father paid me. I told them I was evaluating my options. 2 weeks after my departure, I received a certified letter from a lawyer representing Reed Industrial. They demanded that I turn over all company property, including passwords, encryption keys, source code, and any documentation related to Reed Core. I read it twice, then called my own lawyer. Yes, by that point I had already hired one, and not just anyone, someone specializing in intellectual property disputes. In fact, I contacted her the day after I was let go because I knew this was going to happen. My lawyer responded with a clear and direct letter. Reed Core was my personal intellectual property, developed prior to my employment and never formally transferred to the company. The system had been used by Reed Industrial under an informal agreement, but that license was terminated upon my departure. Any further use without authorization would constitute copyright infringement. Furthermore, I had no obligation to provide access to software I owned, and any attempt to force such access would be defended in court. She also made it clear that I had properly returned all company equipment and property upon my exit, and that the encryption keys and credentials for personally owned software were not company assets. My father's lawyer's response was basically pure noise, accusations of bad faith, alleged breaches of fiduciary duty, threats of lawsuits, and even insinuations of criminal charges. A lot of legal jargon designed to intimidate. My lawyer replied by taking down every point. I had been let go without cause. No transition plan was implemented despite my prior willingness to cooperate. And the fact that the company had not adequately documented or secured its own systems was not my responsibility. She also made it clear that this was a civil intellectual property dispute and that any suggestion of criminal conduct lacked legal foundation. We went back and forth like that for several weeks. In the end, my father's own lawyer must have warned him that the case would be expensive, lengthy, and with an uncertain outcome. Litigating over intellectual property while trying to keep your company from collapsing is not exactly a winning strategy. A month after everything started to fall apart, my father called me personally. This time, I answered. He did not say hello, he just started talking. His voice sounded tired, older than I remembered. Mason, I do not understand why you are doing this. I am your father. This is your family's company. You are destroying everything I built. I let him finish. You did not build Reed Core, the system that ran the entire company. I did. You did not understand it. You did not value it, and you did not protect it. You just assumed it would always be there, because I would always be there. And then you let me go to give my job to your girlfriend. Vanessa is a business partner. Our relationship is irrelevant to company decisions, he replied. Dad, the only thing Vanessa is partnered with is your bank account. She knows nothing about manufacturing. She does not know our clients. She does not understand the systems that make this company run. All she knows how to do is tell you what you want to hear. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. What do you want? He finally asked. Money? Your job back? Just tell me what it takes to fix this. I do not want anything from you, I replied. I wanted a father who valued me. I wanted to build something together. I wanted the future you promised me when I was a kid sweeping floors in your warehouse. I paused. But you have already made it clear that none of that matters to you. Then what? Are you just going to sit back and watch as the company collapses? As all those people lose their jobs? Your mother helped build this company too. She would be ashamed of what you are doing, he told me. It was a low blow bringing my mother into the conversation, but I did not fall for it. Those people did not get paid because you let go of the only person who understood the systems without caring about what he did. That is on you. I gave 8 years to this company, and you replaced me with a woman you have known for 2 years. You told me that everything I had created inside the company belonged to you. Well, now you are going to find out exactly how much of that is actually yours. After saying that, I hung up. Over the next 3 weeks, I watched Reed Industrial fall apart piece by piece. First, the aerospace company canceled its contract. 30% of the revenue disappeared overnight. My father tried to get new clients, but the rumor had already spread in the industry. Reed Industrial had serious operational problems. No one wanted to risk their supply chain with a company that could not even process its own payroll. Then the state labor department stepped in. The wage complaints triggered an investigation. Inspectors showed up at the plant, requesting payment records and employment documentation, all locked inside Reed Core. My father had to hire an accounting firm on an emergency basis to reconstruct 3 months of payroll from bank statements and receipts. It cost him $40,000. Then another client left, and then another one. The production floor went from operating 3 shifts to 2, and then down to just 1. My father had to let go of 20 employees because there was no longer enough work, and then Vanessa disappeared. I found out through Janet, who called me one night to vent. Apparently, Vanessa had been making unauthorized transfers from the company's accounts for months. Small amounts at first, then larger sums, as she grew more confident. When the financial records began to be pieced back together thanks to the emergency accounting, my father finally saw what had been happening. Almost $80,000 had disappeared, transferred to accounts in her name, and then moved before they could trace it. My father confronted her. According to Janet, there was a serious disagreement. Vanessa first denied everything and then changed her strategy. She tried to blame me, saying I had manipulated the system to take money. For once in his life, my father did not believe it. He finally saw through her actions. That same day, Vanessa packed up her corner office and left. She did not even say goodbye. She just loaded her artwork into her expensive car and drove off. The last thing I heard is that she moved in with a real estate developer in another city and was already inserting herself into his business, probably following the exact same pattern. I almost felt sorry for him, but the truth is I no longer cared. 6 weeks after everything began, my father's lawyer reached out to propose a settlement. They wanted to formally license ReadCore and have me provide the necessary access to restore operations. In exchange, they offered a one-time payment of $50,000. I replied with my own terms. $200,000 in licensing fees for the 8 years of prior use, $5,000 a month moving forward. Full recognition as the creator of ReadCore in all company materials, and a formal written apology from my father, acknowledging my contributions. They came back with a counteroffer, $150,000 up front and $3,000 a month. Recognition as creator, but no apology. I stood firm on all my conditions except the apology. My father, it seemed, preferred to let the company keep sinking rather than admit he was wrong. That was fine. I could live without some words on paper. The money would speak clearly enough. We signed the agreement on a Tuesday afternoon. My lawyer handled everything. I did not have to see my father, or shake his hand, or pretend we were still family. There were only signatures on documents and wire transfers hitting my account. The next morning, I drove to the company one last time. Not to gloat or rub anything in, just to restore access and ensure the transition was as smooth as possible. I spent 4 hours with Justin, walking him through the real architecture of the system, handing over documentation I had never shared before, and setting up new administrator credentials that would work from then on. Justin actually behaved well. He apologized for being part of all that. He said he had no idea what Vanessa was planning when she hired him. I believed him. In the end, he was just someone trying to do his job. It was not his fault he got caught up in someone else's mess. When I finished, I left without saying goodbye to anyone. I did not see my father. I did not want to. Some things are better left unsaid. 2 months have passed since the settlement. Reed Industrial is still operating, but barely standing. They lost too many clients, too many employees, and too much accumulated knowledge over the years. My father is trying to rebuild, but it is a slow process. The company that once generated $11 million a year is now struggling to hit $4 million. He had to sell off some equipment just to cover operational costs. As for me, I used part of the settlement money to found my own company, Reed Advanced Systems. Yes, I kept the name. My mother was also a Reed, and she was the one who truly believed in me. I preferred to honor her memory over my father's ego. I am developing a new enterprise system similar to ReadCore, but better, more modular, better documented, designed to be maintained by a team and not reliant on a single person. 3 manufacturing companies have already formally committed to working with me when the new system is ready. 2 of them are former clients of my father's company who sought me out directly after finding out what happened. Apparently, my reputation in the industry was better than I imagined. People knew who had actually built those systems, even if my father never gave me credit publicly. Last week, I hired my first employee, Janet Mills, the floor supervisor from Reed Industrial. My father let her go when he had to cut the 3rd shift. Now she works with me directing operations. She says it feels good to work for someone who actually values what she does. My father and I have not spoken since that call. Every month, he sends the licensing payment. Always on time. Never a note, never an apology, never a word. I suppose that is his way of admitting he was wrong without having to say it out loud. I no longer need it. I do not need to hear from him again either. I just take that money, invest it in my company, and move on with my life. Comment. Hey everyone, I wanted to share a few thoughts after going through this story with you. What really hits me is how important it is to value your own worth and set clear boundaries in any relationship, whether it's family or work. I hope it reminds you that protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's necessary. Sometimes, walking away from situations that no longer serve you opens the door to real growth and new opportunities. Even when things feel unfair, choosing to respond with integrity instead of anger can bring the healing you need. Remember, you deserve people who see and appreciate your contributions without taking them for granted. Taking responsibility for your own path, even when it's tough, builds real inner strength. If you're going through something similar right now, just know that choosing calm over chaos is always worth it. I believe each of us has the power to create a life that honors who we truly are. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.